"I will wash your eyes and you will see," the billionaire's maid said. The billionaire froze at the doorway, his polished shoes hovering just above the marble floor, as if his body no longer trusted gravity. His breath caught painfully in his throat. The air inside his own house felt heavier than it ever had, thick with tension, dread, and something far more dangerous than fear. Hope. "I'll wash your eyes, and you'll see." The words were calm, gentle, spoken without drama. Yet they struck him like a thunderclap. His heart slammed violently against his ribs, each beat echoing in his ears. He tightened his grip on the doorframe, knuckles whitening, as his mind screamed that what he was hearing was impossible. Reckless, insane. 14 doctors had failed. 14 of the best specialists. Money could buy men and women flown in on private jets, surrounded by machines that hummed and glowed, speaking in clinical tones that stripped hope down to nothing. They had used careful phrases, soft sympathy, and hard finality. Progressive, irreversible, incurable. And now, standing in his own kitchen, the impossible was being spoken by the one person he had never thought to listen to. The maid. The morning sunlight spilled through the wide kitchen windows, bathing the room in warm gold. It illuminated a scene that felt unreal, almost staged, like something his mind had invented to protect itself from grief. The maid stood calmly by the sink, her posture straight, her movements deliberate. Her dark hair was neatly pulled back, her simple uniform spotless despite the long hours she worked every day. In front of her stood his son, small, fragile, too quiet for a child his age. The boy's eyes were closed, as they almost always were now. His face was pale, his expression calm in a way that broke his father's heart over and over again. No child should accept darkness so easily. His tiny hands were clasped together at his chest, fingers trembling just slightly, not with fear, but with trust. Trust that someone would keep him safe. The billionaire's chest tightened painfully. Memories flooded his mind without mercy. The first time his son had tripped over a toy and laughed it off. The first complaint of headaches. The moment the boy asked, in a small confused voice, "Daddy, why is the light going away?" That night, the billionaire had sat alone in his study, staring at walls covered in awards, achievements, proof of a life spent winning, while realizing none of it could buy back his child's sight. The maid lifted a clear glass of water. The billionaire's pulse roared in his ears. His instincts screamed at him to intervene, to shout, to demand she stop immediately. This was madness. This was cruelty disguised as kindness. He took a step forward and stopped, because his son did not pull away. The boy tilted his head up slightly, trusting, patient, as if somewhere deep inside he felt safe. The water poured gently over his eyes. It streamed down his cheeks, catching the light as it fell into the sink. The sound was soft, almost soothing. The boy gasped, not in pain, but surprise, then steadied himself. He did not cry. He did not flinch. The billionaire felt his knees weaken. His breath came in short, shallow bursts as his heart battled itself, fear clawing against a fragile, forbidden hope. He had seen experimental treatments fail. He had seen desperation turn into devastation. He told himself this would be no different, and yet, something was different. The maid moved with purpose, not hesitation. She wiped the boy's face gently with a clean cloth, her touch careful, respectful. Not hurried, not nervous. "Open your eyes," she said softly. The world seemed to hold its breath. The boy blinked. Once, twice. His breathing changed, sharper now, quicker. His small fingers tightened together, knuckles paling. I see something," he whispered. The billionaire's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same instant. "What do you see?" he demanded, his voice cracking despite every effort to remain composed. The boy swallowed. "It's bright," he said slowly. "Warm." Tears burned in the billionaire's eyes as legs finally gave way. He sank into the chair behind him, one hand pressed hard against his chest, as if afraid his heart might tear itself free. Light. After months of darkness. Light. The maid nodded slightly, as though this was exactly what she had expected. That's enough for today, she said calmly, setting the glass aside. The billionaire stared at her, disbelief washing over him in waves. What did you do? He asked, his voice hoarse, unrecognizable even to himself. She turned to face him then, not with pride, not with fear, but with quiet certainty. What I was taught, she replied. What no one thought mattered. In that moment, something inside the billionaire cracked wider than grief ever had. All his wealth, all his power, all his certainty about who held knowledge and who did not. It was all wrong, and standing in his kitchen was the proof that the miracle he had been searching for had been silently working in his home all along. The billionaire did not move for a long time. He sat frozen in the chair, eyes locked on his son, as if the slightest blink might shatter the fragile moment unfolding in front of him. His carefully built world boardrooms, negotiations, contracts worth billions felt distant and meaningless, compared to the quiet miracle happening beside the kitchen sink. Daddy. The boy whispered again. That single word broke whatever strength the billionaire had left. He rushed forward, kneeling so fast his knee struck the floor, but he didn't feel the pain. He reached out, then hesitated, terrified of touching his son, as if physical contact might somehow undo what was happening. Yes, my boy. I'm here, he said, his voice trembling. The child turned his head slowly, cautiously, as if the movement itself was something new. His eyes, still glassy, still adjusting, shifted in the direction of his father's voice. I can see your shape, the boy murmured. You're big and dark blue. The billionaire let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Dark blue, his suit. The same suit he had worn every day since hope had begun slipping away. Armor against a world that suddenly felt cruel and uncontrollable. The maid stepped back, giving them space. She watched quietly, hands folded in front of her, as if this outcome was not a miracle but a responsibility fulfilled. How? The billionaire finally managed to ask again, his voice low now, restrained by awe rather than shock. Every specialist said his condition was irreversible. They said the nerve damage. They spoke what they knew, the maid replied gently. But not everything that heals is written in books. The billionaire turned to her sharply. You're telling me 14 doctors were wrong? She met his gaze steadily. I'm telling you they didn't know what I know. Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the sound of the boy's breathing, steady, alive. Filled with curiosity rather than fear, the billionaire rose slowly to his feet, towering over the maid, yet for the first time in his life, he did not feel powerful. He felt small, humble. Double quotes, where did you learn this? He asked. The maid hesitated, just briefly. From my grandmother, she said. She lived far from cities, far from hospitals. People came to her when they had nowhere else to go. The billionaire frowned. And this? Washing of the eyes? It's not just water, she said. It's preparation, patience, timing, and care. Eyes can forget how to see when fear takes over. The words struck him harder than he expected. Fear. He had surrounded his son with fear, disguised as protection, constant testing, constant monitoring, endless whispers of what would never be possible again. The boy reached out suddenly, his hand brushing against his father's sleeve. He smiled, small and uncertain, but unmistakably joyful. Daddy, your face. It's blurry, he said. But I think you're smiling. The billionaire laughed openly now, tears spilling down his cheeks without shame. I am, he said. I promise you I am. But beneath the joy, another emotion stirred. Guilt. How many times had he walked past this woman in his own home without truly seeing her? How many mornings had she cleaned quietly, cooked silently, existed invisibly while he chased solutions across the globe? "You should have told us," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You never asked." The words landed like a verdict that evening. The billionaire canceled everything: meetings, calls, dinners. For the first time since his son had lost his sight, the house felt alive again. Laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for months. The boy explored carefully, guided by his father's voice. Touching furniture as if rediscovering an old friend, doctors were called. But this time not in desperation, in disbelief. By nightfall, preliminary tests showed something no one could explain: neural response where there had been none. The impossible, documented. The maid watched from the doorway as experts whispered frantically, their certainty unraveling, and the billionaire finally understood something that wealth had hidden from him his entire life. Miracles do not always arrive in white coats. Sometimes they arrive quietly, carrying a mop, wearing a simple uniform, waiting patiently to be seen. And this was only the beginning. The news did not stay inside the house. By the next morning, the billionaire's private phone would not stop vibrating. Messages poured in from doctors, board members, journalists, and people he had not spoken to in years. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted access. Everyone wanted to be close to a miracle. But inside the house, time seemed to slow. The boy woke up before sunrise. For the first time in his young life, he did not wake in darkness. Light slipped through the curtains in soft shades: pale gold, gentle white, faint green from the trees outside. He sat up slowly, heart pounding, afraid it might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Mama?" he called, instinctively. His mother rushed in, breath caught in her throat as she saw him sitting upright, eyes open, tracking the light. "I can see the window," he whispered. "It's bright." She collapsed beside the bed, holding him, crying so hard she could barely breathe. For months she had stayed strong for him, but now the strength broke free as tears. Downstairs, the billionaire stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the same glass of water the maid had used the day before. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His mind replayed every second again and again, searching for logic, for control, for something he could understand. But miracles do not negotiate. The maid entered quietly, tying her apron. She stopped when she saw him. "You should rest," she said softly. He turned to her. For the first time, his eyes were not above her. They were level, equal. "I owe you more than rest," he replied. "I owe you the truth. And so does the world." Her expression tightened. "I did not do this for the world." "I know," he said. "That's what scares me." By midday, doctors filled the living room again. Scans were taken. Tests repeated. Numbers checked and rechecked. Every result confirmed the same impossible conclusion. The boy's vision was returning slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. One doctor finally spoke what they were all thinking. "This contradicts everything we know." The billionaire looked at his son, who was carefully stacking blocks by color, smiling at his own progress. "Then maybe," he said calmly, "everything you know is incomplete." The press arrived by evening. Cameras lined the gates. Headlines were written before questions were asked. Some called it a medical breakthrough. Others whispered superstition. A few accused the billionaire of staging it all. Through it all, the maid stayed inside, silent until the billionaire called a meeting. He stood before his staff, his advisors, his security team, and her. "I built my life believing power comes from control," he began. "From money, from authority." His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "Yesterday, someone with none of those things reminded me how wrong I was." He turned to her. "This woman saved my son when the world told me to give up." Murmurs spread through the room. I don't want secrecy, he continued. And I don't want exploitation. What I want is truth and respect. He offered her a seat beside him, not behind him. Not beneath him. Beside him, her hands trembled slightly as she sat. I will fund research, he said to the room. Not to own this knowledge, but to understand it. And I will do it under one condition. All eyes turned to her. She leads it, he said. Silence fell like a held breath. The maid looked at him, stunned. I am not a scientist. He smiled softly. Neither were the people who discovered half the things that saved the world. They were listeners. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from something far rarer, being seen. That night, as the boy fell asleep holding his father's hand, he whispered, Daddy, will she stay? The billionaire squeezed his hand gently. Yes, he said. She's family now. Outside, the world buzzed with speculation and doubt. Inside, something far more powerful had already begun, a reckoning. Asterisk. The house no longer felt like a monument to wealth, it felt like a place that was learning how to breathe. In the days that followed, the billionaire began noticing things he had ignored for years. The way footsteps echoed differently when the house was quiet. How sunlight shifted across the walls hour by hour. How his son's laughter now carried direction instead of uncertainty. The mansion, once cold and efficient, was changing with him. And at the center of that change was the boy. Every morning, he woke eager instead of afraid. He traced shapes with his fingers, then with his eyes. He learned to recognize colors slowly, carefully, as if greeting old friends he had only heard stories about. Red startled him. Blue calmed him. Green made him curious. One afternoon, while sitting in the garden, he looked up suddenly and said, Daddy, the sky is bigger than I imagined. The billionaire turned away so his son wouldn't see his tears. Doctors continued to arrive, but their tone had changed. They no longer spoke in absolutes. They asked questions. They observed. They admitted uncertainty. Some stayed late into the night, watching the boy play, reviewing scans, whispering to each other, with a mixture of humility and awe. Still, not everyone believed. Critics appeared on screens. Articles questioned ethics. Anonymous voices accused the family of false hope. Some demanded the maid be removed from the situation for safety. The billionaire read every word. Then he did something no one expected. He invited them in. A controlled, transparent observation began. Independent specialists. Open data, no secrecy. No staged moments. Just truth, unfolding slowly. The maid cooperated fully, not with fear, but with calm confidence. She explained her process again and again, never claiming certainty, never promising outcomes. I didn't heal him, she told them. I listened to him. His body did the rest. That answer unsettled people more than any miracle claim, because it meant the solution wasn't something you could buy. As weeks passed, the boy's progress stabilized. His vision would never be perfect, the doctors admitted, but it no longer needed to be. He could read large letters, recognize faces, walk confidently through rooms that once terrified him. He was living, the billionaire. Meanwhile, faced a reckoning of his own. At a board meeting, an executive slid a proposal across the table. Licensing, branding, a global opportunity. They called it. He didn't even read it. He stood up instead. My son is not a business model, he said quietly. And neither is hope. Silence followed him out of the room. That night, he found the maid packing her bag. You're leaving, he said, panic flickering through his voice. She nodded slowly. The boy is stronger now. You don't need me the way you did. That's not true, he replied instantly. I need you. She met his eyes. Then don't make me small again. Those words landed harder than any accusation. The next day, he made his decision public. The mansion would no longer be just a home. It would become a foundation-free clinics, research spaces, Family support programs focused on conditions written off as hopeless. The maid would not be hidden or elevated unnaturally. She would be respected, protected, heard. He offered her partnership, not gratitude. She accepted. Months later, standing in a bright hall filled with children's voices, the billionaire watched his son guide another child by the hand. "You'll be okay," his son said confidently. "I was scared too." The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment. This was the return on everything he had ever built. That evening, as the sun dipped low, he sat with the maid on the steps outside. "I spent my life thinking success meant never needing help," he admitted. "But the moment I needed it most, it came from the place I least expected." She smiled gently. "That's usually how truth arrives." Inside, the boy laughed loudly, calling for them both. "I can see you," he shouted happily. "Both of you." The billionaire stood, offering his hand to the maid, not as an employer, not as a savior, but as an equal. Together, they walked inside. The world would keep arguing, doubting, demanding explanations. But inside that house, something irreversible had already happened. A man had learned humility. A child had learned sight. And a woman the world once overlooked had reminded everyone of something ancient and powerful, that healing does not always come from brilliance. Sometimes it comes from patience, sometimes from listening, and sometimes from the quiet courage of someone who dares to believe when everyone else has stopped. And once that truth is seen, no amount of money can make you unsee it.